It's being touted as the biggest drug bust in Canadian history and probably the most dramatic. A story covering 2 continents, a plane chase, and up to $1 billion worth of cocaine.
This was a big case. I considered it the largest case I'd ever worked.
We did not know anything about the pilot.
23 years for the pilot Boulanger. His name is Raymond Boulanger. Raymond Boulanger.
Well, I don't regret it. It was a hell of a lot of fun, let me tell you. It was quite a ride. I was involved in a lot of different operations.
Operations supervised by the CIA.
I used to think the CIA were the good guys, and then you start to realize the more you work for them, well, we're not the good guys. We're actually the bad guys. I talked with Pablo many times, and he was well into the CIA. They were all in bed with him. Cocaine. That's when it got interesting.
I was considered one of the biggest traffickers at that time. They asked me if I can help him, and I did.
The cartels have a history of violence, a wide trail of destruction and death.
Bad people.
It's the Far West.
It's all part of the game. My grandfather said there's 3 ways you can live life. You can lead, you can follow, or you can get the fuck out the way. I prefer to lead.
Raymond Boulanger. What a character, eh? My first impression? Yep, that guy's a bundle of nerves.
It was love at first sight, eh?
Well, I was pretty good at flying at low level and stuff like that, so, and I was a bit daredevil, let's put it that way.
I think that to be a bush pilot, you have to be passionate and a little crazy.
And that was the start of my flying career.
He took a lot of risks. What happened was bound to happen. He had an accident.
When you're looking for trouble, you're gonna find it.
They said there's a contract coming up. Nobody said, do you want to go to Asia? That's all part of the black operations cycles. But you're generally getting shot at most of the time, yeah.
So that was the start of his adventures. It's probably what influenced what was to come. Time will tell.
John Raymond, take 1.
Here we go.
How should we start the documentary?
How should we what? No idea. A huge boom, maybe? A zoom in on a conveyor? I don't know. I'm a born rebel. It's in my blood. People like bad boys. People like people that flip the bird at authority and the government. I've always been a black sheep. I always will be. I don't walk with the crowd, ever. Never did, ever in my life. I'm a loner. I'm like a lone wolf. You're responsible for your own actions, not anybody else's.
Raymond Boulanger, in many ways, he's like a modern-day Indiana Jones. Like a Formula One pilot, only he pilots planes.
He has flown over 50 aircrafts. His career is quite unique in the aviation world. Few pilots have flown that many planes in such differing conditions as well.
It's as if he were born piloting a plane. It was in his blood.
I think he's better than most pilots. He's quite a character, Raymond Boulanger.
He was able to work under a lot of pressure. He was capable of taking huge risks.
When you take a look at his life, there aren't many people that would have done all of that. There are very few people like him. We have to keep that in mind. He's a one-of-a-kind pilot.
He was a bandit in legal terms, but I've always seen him as a gentleman.
He was very polite, respectful, funny, and crazy.
2 arrests, 2 escapes, and caught a 3rd time after being on the run for a year.
Raymond wasn't easy to manage.
Listen, you're a pretty incredible person, a really likable guy, and you seem to be able to deal with the risk involved in what you do in a remarkable way.
A little unsettling, I must admit.
Well, certain people it seems like a lot, but that's how it is. And there's risk in everything we do. Without risk, there's no reward. You know, we're pirates. We have ways and means to get things done. You want to fuck with us, we'll fuck with you. That's the name of the game.
If I did illegal stuff like that, well, I wouldn't be too vocal about it.
Hold on, hello?
Yes, Raymond.
Yes.
Jacques Normando speaking.
Ah, Jacques Normando. Okay. We're shooting. Yeah, but sure, no problem. Go ahead. We're shooting. But yeah.
You have to leave the room to speak privately with your lawyer. Of course, I tend to tell clients not to extrapolate their way of life. We've tried to tell Mr. Boulanger to avoid going into the details of his situation, given the circumstances.
Did it work?
More or less. I'd say in this case it was a challenge.
Okay, before you answer all their questions, there are a few details I would have liked to go over with you privately. Can we talk now? Is it safe?
Yeah, sure, no problem. Go ahead.
If you need to, go to another room. All right, here goes.
Okay.
There isn't a lack of witnesses, stories, or accounts of this adventure concerning the Casey case.
You come to realize, well, I can't believe it all. I can't.
Most of the things that I knew about him is because he himself told me about that.
Is he going to say exactly what happened? From his perspective, I think so.
Here's the story. You either like it or you don't. If you don't like it, tough shit. Could I care less? Couldn't give a damn. Period. It's that simple. Great fucking sound, eh? It's like music to my ears.
Montjoly Radio, Romeo Mike, Quebec, final descent, strip 25.
My brother had been born and they were expecting a girl the second time round. When I arrived, well, I was a boy. So that was it. John was the first name that came out, so I ended up with John Raymond. Well, what's funny is that in all the documents when I worked in Black Ops, the passports, all the passports I had, my identities, there was a John in all of them. A John Kelly, John Clarkson, it always started with a John. It was a traditional thing in a sense. My Scottish relatives, they all had a John in their family. My mother is Scottish. She was born in Kilmarnock, Ayrshire, and met my dad in 1943 in Glasgow. And my mum came over here as a war bride. 1943, she arrived in Quebec City. And my grandfather bought her a fur coat because he figured she wasn't dressed well enough for Canadian cold. So he bought her a big fur coat, which she kept all her life, beaver coat. My dad didn't arrive until 45, and then they sent him home. But my mum was already here. Oh, well, my dad was the superintendent of the foundry here in Montjoly, and he managed quite a lot of employees. He was pretty well known. He was a war hero here, and he was also a staff sergeant. My father was really well known around here. In the early 30s, it was the Great Depression, and that's when he started his career. As a bootlegger. Oh, that's it. Well, the kids used to do that. Back that was in the Prohibition. There was a lot of bootleg going on because Canada was exporting all the booze to the United States, and that was one of the jump-off points. You know, the 8 to 10-year-old crowd there, they would get paid to go and listen, spot for the revenuers, or the RCMP or the police. Let the bootleggers know so they could hide the booze before the cops got there. So they were getting paid 25 cents an hour for that. So in those days, that was big-time money. There's no such a thing as a legal way to make money. You make money or you don't make money, you know. Illegally, it all depends on whose perspective, you know.
Now, Raymond Boulanger's father was also one of the instigators of Raymond's future passion for aviation, because in the early 1960s, he started piloting himself.
I used to fly with my dad all the time, but I'd sit on his knees to fly, but my legs weren't long enough to reach down to the rudder pedals. He put these two big wooden blocks on the rudder pedals so that then I could touch them. I couldn't use the brakes, but I didn't really need to. I could actually touch the rudder pedals so I could fly. So that was kind of fun.
You see the point there? That's where I live, Avenue des Vétérans. There, right there below. We used to walk down here when we were kids.
Montjoly was an airport there for quite some time. During the war, it was a patrol airport. It was an air gunnery school for the Commonwealth Air Training Program. Quite a lot of activity, and several airlines were operating there. It was non-stop. They had quite a mix of airplanes. You never knew what was coming down, you know. It would be a York, and then a DC-4, then a C-46, and whoa, here comes a Globemaster. So it was quite impressive. We had quite a lot of fun. We'd sit around on the airport during recess and watch them coming and going all the time. We'd bring our little snacks and stuff like that and just go sit out there and, you know, on the butt in the hill and watch the airport. And I liked the DC-3 because it was a particularly graceful airplane. I loved the sound of the engines of the DC-3. It had a very particular sound to it. Only a DC-3 sounds like that. Comfortable roar of a big, heavy-duty piston engine. There's nothing like it. It's music. And sure enough, I grew up, and when I was 21 years old, I finally got my captain's check on a DC-3. There was no question in my mind. That's what I was going to be doing, flying one of those things when I grew up, yeah. It has to be in your heart. It's love, you know. It's not a profession. I went to Cartierville and Ville-Saint-Laurent to Wandel Aviation so I could complete my commercial license, multi-engine, and instrument rating. And that was the start of my flying career. But that was a pretty busy airport.
Raymond Boulanger. What a character, eh? The first time I saw him, I think it was at dispatch at Wandel Aviation. My first impression? Yep, that guy's a bundle of nerves.
Ghislain de Rocher, he was my instructor when I did my commercial license. A little rough around the edges, definitely not the airline type, but an excellent pilot, so I got to know him pretty good.
He acted like a kid. That's why I nicknamed him Le Flo, or Kid. He was really, really skilled. But humans are like machines. There's always a way to go beyond one's limits. Hey, kid. Calm down, fuck, right?
There was a kind of freedom that existed back then that has probably vanished today. Today, there are many more pilots following set parameters in very precise security protocols. Back then, things were pretty open. People wanted to fly. They wanted a sense of freedom that wasn't allowed otherwise in society. As aviators or pilots, people got that taste of freedom.
The simple fact of piloting airplanes made you, attractive, let's say.
I've never done anything really in my life to seduce girls. To me, it's very secondary. So I was more interested in my flying and all that. Girls were not a priority in my life. Never were. It's always been my airplanes. But my first love happened when I was 17.
In 1966, I was 19. I was a pretty wild girl for the times. That day, Marie-France and I were in my car. We were driving around, and suddenly we saw a sign. Plane ride, fly over the city. I think that, if I recall correctly, it was $10. $10 for a plane ride? Let's do it.
One day, I don't recall it precisely, but two girls showed up. Two friends. They showed up at Wandel Aviation, and they wanted a plane ride.
They came for an airplane ride, and they were dressed in these go-go girl type costumes, you know, like hippies, all flowery stuff. And they both arrived to go for the airplane ride.
We went in. There were a bunch of guys, Two of them stood out, Ghislain and Raymond.
So he took them up for their little $5 airplane ride. And we hit it off with both girls and started dating them. He dated Marie-France and I was dating Louise. So that started from there.
But the real story is that he and I and the two go-go dancer girls, both couples were married within a year.
It was love at first sight, eh? He was an excellent pilot. We did acrobatic flights. We did rolls. We did spins.
It was never enough.
Flying at low altitude and chasing around there, just goofing off.
He was a daredevil.
We'd play tag. Ghislain and Marie-France were in one plane, and we'd be in another, and we'd chase after each other a bit.
It's a lot of fun to do that, loops and rolls and spins and dives. You know, it's fun.
It was completely illegal.
You just go very up fast and you just change attitude really fast and you get the zero part where you just float up and we chase each other around the cows fields and up and down.
The cows weren't scared. But you never do tricks like that at low altitudes close to horses. They go crazy. It's incredible. Forget about it. Horses, stay away from them. But the cows, no problem, okay?
Adrenaline, that's all part of it. That's basically why we fly, you know, and we enjoy being up in the air. That's the element.
It's never enough.
The thrill and the buzz, the adrenaline you get out of doing stuff like that, that's the whole feeling.
It was never enough.
I loved it. I always wanted him to do it again. I'd ask him to do it again and again and again. I'm sure that lots of pretty girls would say he's a pretty good lover.
My God, show some restraint, please.
He was fearless. And he took a lot of risks, and of course, he had a taste for danger. So what happened was bound to happen. He had an accident.
When you're looking for trouble, you're going to find it. I was in Sainte-Thérèse. I was part-time chief instructor there. Raymond was flying there too. It was about a half an hour, not even a half an hour, just before sunset.
Raymond, Ghislain, and I were at the Galaxy Flying Club in Sainte-Thérèse, and a friend of his asked to go fly with him. His name was Robert Arsenault.
He was working towards his private license. He didn't have it yet. He said, come with me, you know. So I was about to leave to go home. It was about just past 6 in the afternoon. I said, okay, we'll go. We'll do one ride. So I went along with him.
So Raymond and Robert took off. Ghislain and I stayed behind. And we waited for them. They were supposed to be gone for 15 to 20 minutes.
The sun set, night fell, and they didn't come back.
A few minutes after takeoff, the plane crashed in an old military camp called Camp Bouchard.
The aircraft stalled out, you know, on a turn, and then we dove straight into the bush.
The accident was spectacular. Robert Arsenault was killed on the spot.
He died. His head was smashed into the instrument panel, and the control column, there was a little steering thing like that, was up his rib cage. So that was it. Me, I went through the windshield and everything, and right.
It was late in the evening. It was dark out. What was going on? I grabbed the phone and started making calls. I called the Quebec police and asked them if they knew something.
And I crashed just past 6, so I'd been up in the bush there for 6 hours. So I'd lost a lot of blood. I was pretty badly smashed up. I took my jeans, I wrapped them around my leg with some foam, So I was conscious enough to do that. The survival must have kicked in, the instinct kicked in. I have no recollection of doing it.
I finally got the news, and that evening was awful, awful, awful. 6 hours of pure hell is what it was, my God.
We found out that one of the two was theoretically deceased. And the other one was at the St. Jerome Hospital.
So my dad said, well, we better get in the car, let's go and see if it's ours, so.
I went to go see Rameau there that same evening. He was banged up pretty bad, and he was complaining. He was asking for morphine or anything else.
Yeah, both legs broken on my left side, my jaw, punctured lungs, virtually smashed the ratchet. Jaw bones, all my left side was pretty well broken up.
He had broken bones all over his body, so it was really serious.
One could say it was a miracle he survived the crash.
Unfortunately, Robert didn't have such luck. Oh, Robert, he passed away.
In theory, it was Rameau's responsibility to say, whoa, 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 stop it.
Why in the hell should I have any regrets? About what? Why should I regret anything? I don't have any regrets for it. Period. It happened, it is. I took responsibility for it. Move on. What's the point of sticking on this thing?
I said, all right, listen, did you learn anything? Yeah. I asked him what he could do to change his ways, given the lessons he learned. He said, nothing. I'm not convinced that the accident, as serious as it was, made him want to change his ways at all, or his frame of mind. I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Something happens to him one day, and the next day it's done, it's behind him. He started flying again, life was beautiful. I don't think he has any regrets, no, I don't think so.
There's lots of other stuff that I don't feel responsible for too. That's my job. When I take somebody out in a combat operation, I send him on a one-way ticket to visit his ancestors. I don't go feeling responsible for that either. All is fair in love and war, so that's just the name of the game.
After the accident, he kept on working a bit at Wandell's, but I think he needed more than that. He wanted to venture out into the unknown. An opportunity knocked eventually. For example, one of his friends started a company called Dulbo Aviation. That's where he got his first job as a bush pilot.
I think that to be a bush pilot, you have to be passionate and a little crazy.
It's physically difficult, it's very hard, and you're always flying in treacherous conditions, bad weather and stuff like that. So I take my hat off to bush pilots. They're the best in the world.
Most of the time, bush pilots transport hunters, fishermen, geologists, and prospectors to remote places. You have to be able to land on land and water at any time.
Bush pilots, as opposed to aviators that are members of a club or work for an air carrier, have to plan their trips from A to Z. They have to take into account all the resources they will need, like fuel. They must make sure that where they land, gasoline cans are ready in order to refuel and make the round trip. They must take into account weather conditions. They are 100% responsible for their flights.
A good pilot has to understand all the possible dangers and be able to face them.
The dangers are present much more in the bush because of the remoteness of the areas. You develop your skill, or you die doing it, one or the other. But that's all part of it. But there's always fire in the bush. You have to be very careful, because once the forest fire starts, it's pretty damn hard to stop it. And it gets out of control. That was the summer of 1971. It was a huge forest fire. God knows it burned out something like 850,000 acres or something like that. I'm not sure, but it was huge. I had to go evacuate some people from a lake, 5 American customers that were up there, get them out because it was an area-wide evacuation order. They wanted everybody out of the area. I flew up to Fire Lake to get these guys and picked the 5 of them up, and that's it. It was like a snowstorm, only it was cinders, ash.
There was smoke everywhere. You could see the ash falling, like huge snowflakes.
The fire was blazing. My God, it was nuts. So I went up there to get the guys, and I told them, get your asses on board, boys.
That's it. Leave the baggage, get in the plane, we're leaving. And we never got back to Albadell because the fire by that time had reached the west side of the lake, so I couldn't get back. So I just followed down the west side of Lake Mistassini, looking for a river that would run so I could follow that river westward and get the hell out of the fire. Treetops are all in flames and everything.
The treetops were burning. It was really intense.
It wasn't just a small fire. It was a huge one.
The Americans were all excited, though. They were filming it. It was a big adventure for them.
They thought it was big and exciting. Me, I had my side window down. I'm wiping the front window because of the soot and the cinders. Well, I was pretty damn concentrated in doing my job, so I wasn't going to kill my ass and all the rest of them. So you concentrate and you take care of what you're doing just to get your ass out of there, to make sure you don't become a statistic. So you just keep busy doing your damn best to get your skills to get you out of there. The heat had gone, everything was off the clock, and the engine was just, by the grace of God, it was still ticking over. I said, it's got to stop. I saw this lake, and I said, okay, here it is. So I just pulled the power, and in I went.
Yeah, I cranked the flaps down, and I headed for the lake. Zoom! I cut the engine, dropped right in.
We had to stick the tail of the aircraft in the trees, and we cleared a few trees, and then we spent the night on top of the airplane as the fire burned its way past the mountain. Next step is figure out how long we're going to be here and how we get out of here.
Yeah, in the morning, once the sun rose, we got down from the plane and we saw a little island out on the northwest side of the lake. And it was quite wide, so we made it to the island. And the funny thing is that the Americans were all smokers. And in my survival kit, I had a big can of Players tobacco. You know, the big Players cans they sell with rolling papers.
And they started rolling that, and I said, well, you should limit your cigarettes, because you could be here for a little while. No, we'll be out here in a couple of days. But within 2 or 3 days, they smoked all the tobacco. And then they ended up having to smoke the dry tea leaves.
Yeah, we were stuck there for 13 days.
When I found out they had disappeared, Raymond was with them. It wasn't just a group of Americans. Again with the drama, again with the worry. It wasn't easy. I was kind of young to be a widow, but it was. Yeah, it was devastating. So along with me, his father and his sister, me, Jack and Gail, so we took Jack's car and we drove up to Chibougamau.
My engine, I'd run it every hour or so, and I had put a copper wire that ran it up to my HF antenna, and I ran 2 porcelain cups on the top of some trees, and I ran a wire there so I could increase the range of my reception or my transmission for my HF radio. The oil cooler was cracked and everything, so I couldn't leave the engine running for any more than a couple of minutes at a time.
Yeah, I did that for a number of days. If I remember correctly, it was a Monday morning, our 13th day. 13 is a lucky number for us. An auditor of the Canadian Air Force answered me that day, and he had just taken off from Albinel.
We got you. So he picked up, and then they flew right over us, and then they pinpointed us.
Finally, yeah, good news. He had been found. It was a time to party.
There was a big party at the hotel that night. It was quite a celebration. Yeah, it was fun.
They thought we'd crashed into the lake. Yeah, but everything turned out fine.
And finally, time to go to bed. We went up to our room and closed the door. Louise, and she said, why didn't you get married? You don't have a husband, always be gone and this and that. She said, you have to make a choice. It's either me or your airplanes.
Something broke inside of me that day, probably. It was hard for me to accept that Raymond's #1 passion was planes. I wanted to be his #1 passion.
That was a bad decision she made, so anyway, she was invited to leave and locked the door on her way out. That was it. It was instantaneous. I don't take a long time to make decisions. I would be dead if I did. In my business, you have to act pretty damn quick.
That's what happened. Of course, during the divorce, things got pretty ugly. For me and for anyone, divorce is far from pleasant. It's painful, but that's how it is.
Game over. That was it. No woman ever gonna give me an ultimatum, ever.
That was probably my last bush flight, I think. I handed in my resignation 3 or 4 weeks later. A month later, that's it. I'd had enough of forest fires. And there you have it. That was the wildfire story of June 71. I think it was in 71. And I started Black Operations the year after, 72, 73, something like that.
The owners of the flying school where I was at were pilots that had worked there during the Second World War. They're very skilled pilots that developed their skills flying across here, extremely difficult terrain to fly over. Well, I was pretty good at flying at low level and stuff like that, and I was a bit daredevil, let's put it that way. They said there's a contract coming up. Nobody said, do you want to go to Asia? That's all part of the Black Operations cycles.
At that time, the Americans were involved in the Vietnam War. It was during the last years of the war, in the early 70s. Officially, the U.S. troops were only supposed to be on mission in Vietnam, but they also had ops in Cambodia and Laos. They needed pilots to supply troops and, at the end of the war, to pull them out of there.
This particular type of operation where you would fly in at night, undercover, and relocate agents. You bring information out, you bring people in, take people out. It's just like a shuttle service, but clandestine because we're operating undercover.
You see, Vietnam starts here, up north. All that's Vietnam, right here. We were stationed in this area, here. And I'd go all the way up to here and different places like Cambodia. We'd go, but we knew we were in red zones, and these were occupied by Viet Cong. But we went in and out, choo-choo, just like flies. We land, we do our thing, and leave like mosquitoes, doop-de-doop. And we leave real quickly, really quickly.
In Southeast Asia, you had to fly over rivers and jungles. Flying out there is really dangerous. And Raymond says that the conditions there were just about the roughest he flew in during his mercenary career.
It was never 2 flights exactly the same. And you're flying at night, and particularly if you're in the wet season, it rains all the time. Well, if you have the rainy season, the monsoon season, yeah, it's like rains. Makes for difficult flying conditions, but you generally can pick your way among the rain showers, yeah. It's quite tricky. Yeah, you got to be really careful. So you have to know your terrain, your landmarks pretty quick. And you have to be really snap fast and making a decision. Otherwise, you smash into the hills and kill yourself. It's very dangerous. That's why you stay low, so you go fast. You try to, camouflage yourself as much as possible. But you're generally getting shot at most of the time, yeah. This is not the kind of work for people that are overly cautious or fly by the book, because you better go somewhere else.
It's a war. You're trying to kill the other guys. So you got to keep it together. You have to stay calm. There's no room for panic.
Or you could stay right over the trees, which is a good technique too, right hugged to the trees, because they can hear the noise of the airplane, but they can't see it. So by the time they go, you're over them and past, so. They have very minimal chance of hitting you with small arms fire. That was very important to keep an eye on where the supplies were coming so that you had logistics and they knew where to bomb at particular times. But at one point, they just gave up. They just carpet bombed the whole area, Cambodia and everything. Just totally illegal what they did. It was a crime against humanity. And nobody was ever prosecuted for that. That's when I started thinking, the hell are these guys doing? I mean, what gives them the right to go and kill all these millions of people? Nobody asked them to come here.
When they started bombing Cambodia and Laos, Nixon was in charge. And what they were doing down there was just downright criminal. Fact is, you know, the Americans during the Vietnam War, they dropped more tons of bombs on Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos than they did during all of World War II. That's a pretty chilling image. It's not criminal. These people didn't do anything to the United States. They didn't give a shit about the U.S.
The parties that want these operations to take place don't want anybody to know that they're the ones that are organizing this because it's criminal. You know, you're killing people.
I don't miss it one bit. Southeast Asia wasn't my favorite place at all.
Astronaut Club. That was a social club at the airport in Cartierville at Wandale Aviation. It was quite a lot of fun, so a lot of the activity pilots meet there, discuss jobs and who's flying where, what's going on. Let's call it a glorified rumor mill fueled by beer, lots of beer.
Obviously, it was the 70s, swinging was in, and pilots followed suit. They'd swap contracts, and when people were looking for pilots for specific missions, you could meet them in those kinds of places.
And in one of those bars, Raymond Boulanger met someone by the name of Peter Knox. Who was he? He was a stunt artist, but he was also a stand-in for an American actor, James Coburn.
And he did a lot of flying and stuff like that, flying marijuana back from Mexico into the United States.
And so one night, he was having a drink with Raymond, and he said, listen, I'm looking for a co-pilot for a mission I'm going on south of the States. And he told Raymond, it's kind of a special mission.
Basically, what Peter Knox did was to take off from the States and go down to Mexico to pick up marijuana. Cocaine wasn't in the picture yet. It was all about marijuana.
I think that Raymond quickly came to understand that an empty plane means no money. He was making $35,000 to $40,000 per flight. It was his first experience transporting marijuana. For him, it was a job like any other. He didn't get a special thrill out of it, other than having to fly low. You had to avoid getting caught, so you had to fly below the radar.
It was kind of funny.
So that was the start of his adventures. It's probably what influenced what was to come. Time would tell.
They called them hippies in those days. They were peace and love, and they didn't want war, and they were the major engineering behind the protests against the Vietnam War. But the kind of people I pretty well associated with, they weren't of the hippie crowd type. You know, they were the cut and dry shirt and tie types, you know. They weren't your general goof-offs, smoking dope and hippies like that. Dress for the part, you know, in like jeans and t-shirt and ready to move quick. Couldn't be a hippie without smoking dope. You don't know what's going on around you. If you behave that way, you don't survive in this business.
The Vietnam War, picture it. It started around 1962. It lasted until 1975. So during that time, there were tens of thousands of military specialists. Some of them were aviation experts. Those people were looking for work in the United States and elsewhere, and what they knew especially was flying aircrafts.
At one point during his career, Raymond Boulanger met pilots that flew planes during the Vietnam War.
Most of them were potheads.
They were seen as pariahs because there was an anti-war movement in the States. They were considered garbage, like failures.
A lot of pilots left their service after the Vietnam War, and they felt really free over there. It was complete freedom, the kind of freedom Raymond was looking for.
I think Raymond felt he had a lot in common with veterans.
Well, sure. Indeed, a lot of these guys were, combat pilots and had flown helicopters for several years in Vietnam. These guys were good.
These people had nothing left to lose?
You're skillful pilots, you're not bus drivers here. You're talking, it's a different story altogether. They just smoked dope all day long, but that was their normal state of affairs, so they functioned quite well. So they all ended up as drug addicts or doing clandestine stuff, working in the pot business, and that's basically where these guys were doing.
So they started flying marijuana into the United States from Mexico, and they asked Raymond Boulanger to join them. Basically, what these Vietnam vets did was to take off from a housing project in the Florida Keys, a project that had never been completely finished.
There were really wide streets and no houses, so they'd take off from there. Then they'd head down to Mexico to get the marijuana, and they'd bring it back to the Keys.
And it's during one of those flights that Raymond Boulanger made it out to Colombia for the first time.
It's pretty simple. When they would be ready to do a load, they'd call me up, I'd come down. So I'd go out there and I'd climb into DC-6, fire it up, and then cut to the east and then head down between Haiti and Cuba. And never go more 500-600 feet in a nice sunny day and head straight down to the Guajira in Colombia.
Here, it's all this area here.
You have to understand that Guajira is a very particular area. It's like no other place I've ever seen on the earth. It's a desert. It has a very mysterious aura about it. Strange, spiritual type thing, And I've never seen any place on earth like it. It's really, really weird. But it's beautiful. It has a strange beauty to it, just the same.
Have you ever been to the Guajira? It's the far west.
It's the most northern point of South America. It also touches the Venezuelan border. So, it's a territory that was historically marked by different forms of illicit commerce between the two countries.
Of course, just like from Mexico, marijuana runs were much shorter and less risky from there. It was also a passage point for cocaine and Colombian mafia and criminals. The Vietnam War veterans were key in all the Colombian criminality going on.
Being a pilot for drug traffickers is very dangerous, of course.
Well, I remember when I got there the first time, the wind was blowing so hard, and the strip wasn't very large, and it wasn't very long. This stuff is not for amateurs.
These people are obviously paid according to the dangers they face.
It's not just about the money. There is a sense of adventure, the desire to be someone as well.
Adventurous, sure. Insane, that's how I define them.
It's not just about making a lot of money. It's about how you make it.
I would land there, and there would be a reception party, of course, waiting for us. So I would land, I'd leave the engines number 3 and number 4 running, but they would load the aircraft from the left-hand side because I didn't have to fuel. And they would just load it up, and I'd start the 2 engines, take off, and back in Florida. I was usually back by 4:30 in the afternoon, and that was it.
I'd go eat crab and drink beer with a bag full of cash.
It's the first time Raymond Boulanger made it there, but that spot would become notorious in November 1992 because that's the peninsula from which Raymond Boulanger's Convair 580 took off to fly to Casey.
Park the airplane, get out, and that's it. Jump in the car and head out to Ma's Kitchen on the A1A, and the beer was good and cheap, and the stone crab, as much as you could eat. Just happened to be the place to hang out.
So at some point one night while sipping a beer, someone said, there's this company called Southern Airlines, and they're looking for pilots. But Southern Airlines, it turns out, was actually a front for the CIA.
You're not working for the CIA. You're working for companies that are working for the CIA or that are fronted, financed, and actually owned by the CIA. Well, the conflict was an insurgency in Nicaragua. They were trying to overthrow a communist government.
My fellow Americans, I must speak to you tonight about a mounting danger in Central America. I'm speaking of Nicaragua.
The CIA are the biggest drug dealers in the world, bar none. I went in the back of there and I saw a bag and I lifted the tarpaulin on it. It was a bales of cocaine. And then when I got back, I told my boss, I said, by the way, I said, we got cocaine in the airplane. He says, you know about that? I said, yeah. He says, mind your own business. He says, you're paid to fly the airplane. That's where the criminals are. And you think a guy like me that's doing my friggin' job, I'm a criminal? Yeah. Up yours, as I say to the Americans. Stuff it.
It's being touted as the biggest drug bust in Canadian history and probably the most dramatic. A story covering 2 continents, a plane chase, and up to $1 billion worth of cocaine.
This was a big case. I considered it the largest case I'd ever worked.
We did not know anything about the pilot.
23 years for the pilot Boulanger. His name is Raymond Boulanger. Raymond Boulanger.
Well, I don't regret it. It was a hell of a lot of fun, let me tell you. It was quite a ride. I was involved in a lot of different operations.
Operations supervised by the CIA.
I used to think the CIA were the good guys, and then you start to realize the more you work for them, well, we're not the good guys. We're actually the bad guys. I talked with Pablo many times, and he was well into the CIA. They were all in bed with him. Cocaine. That's when it got interesting.
I was considered one of the biggest traffickers at that time. They asked me if I can help him, and I did.
The cartels have a history of violence, a wide trail of destruction and death.
Bad people.
It's the Far West.
It's all part of the game. My grandfather said there's 3 ways you can live life. You can lead, you can follow, or you can get the fuck out the way. I prefer to lead. Pablo Escobar is a roughneck guy. He got around quite a bit. You know, he hustled. He was a good hustler. And then he got into the cocaine. And that's when it got interesting. In those days, it was mostly high-class people that did cocaine, partying, you know, movie stars, lawyers. It was called the recreational drug of the rich.
The demand was enormous here in the United States for cocaine.
The CIA are the biggest drug dealers in the world, bar none.
The CIA created phony air carriers during that time because there was a conflict in Nicaragua.
We were also doing counterinsurgency, which meant locating the enemy and then annihilating them. You'd find out where they were, and then you go in and bomb the living shit out of them. If you're not strong psychologically, then find another line of work.
To do charter flights, there had to be a chief pilot. Raymond's name came up. It was pretty random, actually, but he had all the qualifications needed to be a chief pilot.
Raymond likes a challenge. He's landed in pretty tight places. We were coming back from hunting, and Louis Paul was on the ground, and he was pointing at a shed at the airport. The antennas were shaking inside. I almost shit my pants. Fuck.
You're still alive? Yeah.
That's Raymond.
I don't know why we get married. It's women that wanted that. If it was up to me, I wouldn't have got married. Well, I met her at the Rainbow Bar and Grill. We were having a few beers, and I met her, and we started dating. She was interesting, you know, she had an attractive look about her. We started chatting it up, and that's it. We started dating, and then the rest happened. Amber, I think she was born in 76. And then my son was born in 77. But anyway, the call of the wild came, and I had to go back to work and get back out of there. The nature of the business necessitates that it be kept a secret. You certainly have a double life. You can't, that's all takes place in the darkness, that stuff.
On vacation, what does he do on vacation? That's none of our business. It was his private life. But we always heard rumors. I'd always ask Raymond, hey, what happened there?
Oh, yeah?
Nothing, you know, on vacation, taking time off. But really, there's no proof.
I always work for myself. I'm a freelancer, you know, I'm an individual. I take contracts or I don't take them. I'm approached if they want my services for a job, and I'll evaluate whether I want to do it or not. We have the option to take a contract or not. I'll turn down more than I actually take. You're a mercenary, and mercenaries, we're apolitical, you know. If we're a mercenary, we're hired professionals to do a particular job. We're not hired for a political opinion. They're the ones that are paying us. We don't care what their politics are. That's all word of mouth. People get around. So when jobs come up, people contact you. And when you say on the Rolodex, it's just the word means you're on the list. And a Rolodex is those things you used to put on your decks alphabetically where you flip through for names. And you're looking for somebody's name, you went for the first letter, and you go under B. So when operations come up, they say, oh yeah, I remember this guy, that guy, that guy. So you call up the people and you put together a group. So we get contracts from all these different organizations. That was all CIA people. You have to be careful when you say working for the CIA. We're not working for the CIA. We're doing the CIA's dirty work in black operations under dummy companies that have no name, that appear and disappear in days' notice. So one of their transport companies, which was Southern Air Transport.
Southern Air Transport. Southern Air Transport was a fake company. It was a front for the CIA. The American Secret Service used it for various clandestine missions.
The CIA created phony air carriers during that time because there was a conflict in Nicaragua.
The target was to overthrow the Nicaraguan government run by Daniel Ortega, the communists. They wanted them out of there. Since the Boland Amendment was passed in Congress in 1985, the Americans weren't allowed to interfere in any kind of a government or allow monetary or financial or military assistance into overthrowing a government that had been democratically elected. So they have to do it in black operations so they don't get caught. See, that's when the CIA brings guys like us into the picture. And that's our job. It's to overthrow the government that's in place. That's it.
The Sandinista National Liberation Front took over in Nicaragua. So it was a regime that was sympathetic to Cuba. A communist regime was being established in Nicaragua. And for Americans, that was completely and utterly unacceptable.
Well, you're in an armed conflict. People are trying to kill you. So it does get a little testy at times, yes. But you know that. That's what you're paid for. Yeah, they shoot at you with missiles and small arms fire and all that. We were also doing counterinsurgency, which meant locating the enemy and then annihilating them. You find out where they were, and then you go in and bomb the living shit out of them. You know, and then you come in and check the next day. If there were any survivors, you'd go in there and finish them off too. It's war. We're not going out there playing tiddlywinks. It's serious business.
So, quite rapidly, weapons were distributed, the Contras received equipment and arms.
The Contras? It's a movement that was created as a response to the Sandinista movement to end the communist takeover of Nicaragua. I believe it was mostly financed by the United States.
I have every intention of seeing that these people receive humanitarian support. And how that comes about, we'll just have to wait and see.
The CIA was supplying them with weapons, supplies, and money. in order to overthrow the new Sandinista government.
It's not the kind of business you want everybody to know about. The Contras, we would supply them with the weapons, the guns, the ammunition, the food.
Yeah, it was all planned. We did what we had to do. We had the manifests, and they loaded the plane. I didn't check what was on board, and that wasn't my job.
Over time, Raymond noticed that when he delivered weapons or supplies to the Contras, the planes never came back empty.
I was on my way up to Miami, and I went in the back of there, and I saw a bag, and I lifted the tarpaulin on it. It was bales of cocaine. And when I got back, I told my boss, I said, by the way, I said, we got cocaine in the airplane. He says, you know about that? I said, yeah. He says, mind your own business. He says, you're paid to fly the airplane. And believe me, it's a nasty world out there.
Financing the counterinsurgency required money, and that money came from cocaine trafficking. That's what was financing the purchase of weapons.
There is a number of documents that indicate that the CIA used drug trafficking to finance the counterinsurgency, mainly in Central America and Nicaragua.
Yeah, they were taking money from Escobar, they were taking the drugs from Escobar, and it was all getting patched around. Manuel Noriega had been a CIA asset since he was a student in university.
Yeah, but the guy that really stirred shit up is Reagan. He didn't even know what the CIA was really up to. And then his buddy George Bush, who became his vice president, he's the one who was in charge of the CIA.
I even saw them talking in the corner, you know, Noriega there, Escobar right there, and his brother there, and George Bush sitting over there with Felix Rodriguez right beside him, because they were keeping an eye on their little operation. Because don't forget, Bush, he was the head of the CIA at the time. If I saw it with my own eyes, and I don't give a shit what people think or other things, they can go, I don't care what people think, and I'm not out here to convince anybody of anything. I'm just telling you what it is, and that's it. The CIA are the biggest drug dealers in the world, bar none.
And it's still the case today.
And when it comes to drugs and alcohol, just say no.
They were flying the cocaine into Los Angeles and Florida and Texas, and that's how they pay for their illegal operations.
They got caught red-handed. There was an investigation.
And they all got caught. And they all got convicted. And they all got pardoned.
As contractors, we don't panic. The operation is shut down. We just go somewhere else. We're not involved in their fucking politics. That's their problem.
He was moving around all the time. He never stayed put for long. In fact, he was always doing many things at once. Sometimes he'd try to settle down for a while, but he clearly wasn't meant for that.
I spent my whole life on the road in airplanes and traveling around the world, so it's not very conducive to being married. You're never home. So it's one or the other. You can't have everything your way. And in my entire career, I'd get home and just enough time to change my clothes and pack another suitcase and leave again.
So in '86, I divorced my second wife in 1986. She thought I wasn't home enough, so I told her, sorry, but...
Oh yeah, she moved out west to Ottawa for a while. She got remarried. So the kids stay with their mother. Yeah. How are they going to stay with me? I'm working in the jungles and deserts, Southeast Asia and South America. Yeah, I'm going to have my kids with me. Right. Doesn't work that way. Well, I have a good relationship with my kids. Never changed. They know who their dad is. They don't think I'm a criminal. It's a difficult life if you're raising a family. It doesn't work very well. You know, you're never home. And I don't regret it one inch. I love it. Wouldn't change it. It was late afternoon in Panama. We were walking on the golf course at the Howard Air Base, and we saw a bunch of guys playing soccer over there. They kicked the ball at one point, and it came rolling out to where we were. So we kicked the ball back in, and they just waved over to us and come over, and they waved some beer in the air, and we went over and had a few beers with him, and I recognized the face. I hadn't met him before, but I'd recognized him right away, and that's the first time I saw him. Pablo Escobar is a roughneck guy. He got around quite a bit. You know, he hustled. He was a good hustler. And then he got into the cocaine. And that's when it got interesting. He got into the cocaine 84 or 85, somewhere around there. That's when cocaine started to go big.
Pablo realized the potential, how much money was to be made on that, because everybody lost interest in the marijuana business. You know, there wasn't much profit in it to begin with. One of Pablo's close friends, actually, was his cousin, Gustavo, said, Ray, well, why the hell don't you come and fly with us? Cocaine didn't hit the market and become widely known until the mid-'80s. In those days, it was mostly high-class people that did cocaine, partying, you know, movie stars, lawyers, executives, people with money. It was called the recreational drug of the rich, and it still is.
Demand was starting to increase quite drastically, and a new market was created as a result.
Yeah, you could say that. The United States were the first major market for cocaine, and other countries followed suit. And cocaine got popular all over the world. Cocaine is a drug meant for pleasure, for partying. It has a market. It makes its way to anyone who wants it. At one point, drug trafficking supposedly accounted for 5% of Colombia's GDP. I think it's more than that.
Let's say the global cocaine market is 900 metric tons a year. Colombia produces 80% of that.
It seems that the climate, the geography, and the armed conflict created just the right conditions for Colombia to produce a huge amount, in fact, a huge amount of cocaine.
Pablo Escobar started exporting massive industrial amounts of cocaine, and that became the industrialization of the cocaine business. So it started to be going from 200 or 300 kilos at a time to tons. Because he had the roots into Miami, into Texas, into South California, and it was being controlled by Pablo and Pablo's people. And that's what the cartel was. So Pablo had not only his own cocaine, but he had the cut of everybody else's, who was piggybacking with him because he had the doors. Yes, he had a lot of coke to sell, and it didn't cost him anything, and the others would go through him, and that's how it was. That's how cartels work. You have cartels that form together to control the prices, control the quality of the product, control the distribution, control the territories. They have agreements that are put in place that makes it function. It's like a corporation.
In Colombia, 10 people can get together and start a laboratory. They can produce and sell a ton of cocaine. The buyer has the responsibility of transporting it and delivering it to the US, Australia, and Canada, where it is sold.
I would tell them, this is the kind of airplane you got to use, and you can't load it more than that. You would show them technique. How would they pay me? Many ways. Money, property, vehicles, jewelry, art. They don't write checks. It's all cash. Because you have to understand, each producer has his own trademark. Each producer has his own brand, and they can't mix that around. That thing can be traced from the moment it leaves the lab until the moment it's delivered. And some of them are wrapped in gold leaf paper. Quite proud of those ones. And it said on them, the very best for our very best customers.
And the best way to get cocaine into the United States and to supply other markets was by airplane.
Pablo Escobar used to say that the real heroes in drug trafficking were his first plane pilots.
Piloting schools started popping up throughout the country.
A lot of people got their piloting license, and a whole air fleet was created for Colombia's drug traffickers.
Yeah, they didn't do any training. They just sent guys out there randomly. The guys weren't used to it at all. They hadn't many flying hours, and so a lot of them crashed, messed up. Well, you're flying overloaded airplanes. You're flying in extremely dangerous weather. It's dangerous. It's extremely dangerous. Yeah. You want me to tell you more about it? It's dangerous. The first years I got involved in that, they were dropping off aircraft out of Cali to the rate of 20, 30 a year by using inexperienced pilots, flying in bad conditions when they didn't have to, at night when they didn't have to do that, because they were grossly overloading their airplanes. And I remember many occasions where I knew people that were doing that, and I said, you're going to kill people. Even here up front in the luggage compartment, we could easily put up to 60 kilos in here. They didn't understand aerodynamics and shit like that, that the airplane will fly at that weight. Way beyond that, it won't fly. So it's the entire cruise. You can't bring them back. They're all dead.
The Caribbean Sea is full of planes. It's a drug trafficking cemetery. Being a pilot in the drug trafficking industry was very lucrative. All the poor kids wanted to become hitmen. All the middle-class kids wanted to become pilots. The lifespan of those planes wasn't long.
The way they ran their operations, they obviously didn't understand much about aviation. Seriously. And I sat around the table. I said, "Why are you doing this?" "Well, you know, we're and that." And I said, "Well, you don't understand what's going on, do you?" Because there's no percentage in losing a guy in the ocean and an aircraft and your load just because, you know, you're being stupid. I said, "There's smart ways to do it." And that's the way we changed our tactics a little. So I flipped all that around. I had started doing flights in the daytime, and I showed them how to penetrate air routes and hide among all the air traffic in the daytime. That's when we gave checkouts to the pilots that were able to handle those flights. But we trained them well, and we taught them how to stay safe. They don't understand the nature with the radars and all that. The radar can't track you more than 200 miles or 250 miles away. It doesn't have the range. Even if you fly at night, you're not going to hide from the radar, no matter what the weather or what the time. The radar is going to be there. They're not all geniuses, these drug traffickers, you know. I explained how to use air routes, how to use them to hide from air traffic. They went from losing 20, 30 airplanes a year down to 1 or 2 or 3. And the 1 or 2 or 3 was due to incompetence and taken off way overloaded, but nothing to do with the people that I work with.
That was Raymond Boulanger's heyday, working with drug cartels. He was really there during the golden age, when cocaine made it to Montreal and everywhere else in North America.
In 1977, DEA at the time seized 600 kilograms of cocaine for the whole year in the United States. 1988, DEA seized 60,000 kilos. So the demand was enormous here in the United States for cocaine. We basically were going after the air wing of the cartels.
And eventually, we would catch up to them, and we would start having seizures, and we would start penetrating different areas of their production.
Pablo didn't like the DEA. There was $500,000 U.S. reward for anybody who would shoot a DEA. They were scared shitless, put it that way. They didn't dare.
They killed anyone linked to the DEA. They had their tongues cut off and threw them in the street. The DEA agents were very scared of him as well. Very scared.
So you can believe me, the DEA weren't hanging around in public places.
The Colombians called us the ugly ones. DEA. They didn't like us. Yeah, we always played hardball with them. Always. We never gave anybody a break. Bad people. Yeah. So, yeah, you had to play hardball with them.
Sometimes you get a contract, you'd only be on it for 2 or 3 weeks. Sometimes it could be a month or 2 months. First flight I did to Mexico for the Medellin cartel, and that was into the desert in Nuevo León, southwest of Monterrey. Yeah. You take a look here, there was a strip here called Llanos de Baturi. It's an old 12-mile long lake that dried up. It was 12 miles long, and we used to land jets there. When I arrived there, they didn't tell me who the reception was, you know. I knew it was all taken care of and all that kind of shit. I didn't really know who's there. I just wanted to be sure it's the right place, and that's the coordinates, and yeah. And when I got there and all the lights, I landed and all the lights came on, all I could see was soldiers. I saw soldiers all around it. Just off, shit. You know, the jig is up or something like that. You know, we're done. First trip into here and we're caught. And you could tell they were military. These weren't haphazard, hired thugs, No, these were guys in military uniform. And sure enough, when I opened the door, it was a full lieutenant colonel that came to the aircraft. And he knew my name already because he was expecting me. And he called me by my name, Commandante John. And hey, come on, okay, we'll take you. And we had a cognac. He said, I'll drive you out of here. I'm the one that's going to drive you out of here. Oof. I was pretty relieved after that. About 20 minutes later, we left in a truck. I didn't know, and they didn't tell me that this was all arranged. And I got used to that after that, because it was either the military or the police. It was the either or. Everybody's on their payroll. That's either it. You either work for them or you get killed. It's that simple.
Colombia is one of the most corrupt countries in the world. I think that if corruption were to stop, hypothetically, for a month, the Colombian economy would completely fall apart. Immediately.
I left Cali with drugs on the plane. I left Medellin with drugs on the plane. The police cleared it all. It's simple. They're bought and paid for.
It's outrageous, the corruption in Colombia. It's a way of life, the corruption, so.
I had an informant that worked in the U.S. Embassy. I would pay him $5,000 every Saturday, and he would supply me with the whole map of the Caribbean and all the different zones they had, because they had different zones where they would send the aircraft to patrol. The U.S. Customs, the Coast Guard, and the DEA. I knew where they would take off from, what time they would leave, what type of aircraft it was, and that was good for us because we knew where they were going and we went the other way.
Very efficient, and it was taking us time in law enforcement to catch up to where they were at. We used to make a joke that we were dancing the Macarena and they were on a whole new dance.
Oh, everybody was in on the business. The politicians, the rebels, you name it, everybody was in on it. They're all corrupt, to the yin-yang. Some people will do anything for money, You can pay $50 to get your neighbor shot if you want. You get the picture? If you can get a guy shot for $50, nothing's complicated.
The country has been destroyed by narco-trafficking. The proportion of corruption is terrifying.
It smells of death. People know that a whole slew of people have blood on their hands.
When Escobar was around and narco-terrorism, journalists were being killed like flies in the country. I have 9 bodyguards and 2 bulletproof vehicles. I'd be dead or else. And that's just because I'm a journalist. I'm not involved in narco-trafficking.
23 days ago, I was told I have 1 month to live. Today, I have 7 left.
If you get caught in a crossfire in the drug business, tough shit, buddy. You shouldn't have been there. There's no such a thing as an innocent victim. Don't give me that shit. So you think I'm going to feel empathy for dead people in the drug business? Get the hell out of my face. I'm not ever going to feel empathy for that. If you're not strong psychologically, then find another line of work. There's all kinds of greed people involved. You're dealing with criminal elements of the lowest kind, from all the way to the bottom, the scum bucket, to the top, to the elite, the ruling class. And some of them, the little crooks around there, we call them little chichipatas, they'll pass the word around to their friends. Well, there's a shipment that's going to be passing up there, it's going to go, yeah. So they'll get together, a little gang of them, and they'll arm themselves to the teeth and try and hijack the load. See, yeah, they rarely survive. So we're armed to the teeth, too. We were very heavily armed. I always had my a Beretta 9mm in the back of my jeans, even for normal traveling around in Colombia. I used it. Sure enough, they had laid logs across the trail so that you couldn't get around. You had to actually get out. So the other truck held off in the back, and then one truck got up close enough when the shooting started, and that was it. We expected it. It lasted probably maybe 20 minutes, and when it was finished, there was none of them left. Well, we're armed to the teeth. We reacted. It's just either shoot or get shot, one or the other. When the shooting starts like that, there's a lot of noise going on, and it goes zzz, and you can actually feel the heat off the bugger if it comes close enough. It's not a job, and that helps you. live a long time. I'm here today and they're not. So there's your answer. I survived, they didn't. It's just thrilling, it's exhilarating. And after that, you just say, hot damn, okay, and that's all over. And then you get over there and you go get whiskey and smoke a few cigars, and then we go on to the next job. You know, it takes a couple of days for the adrenaline to wear off. Even after a long drug flight, you know, a successful drug flight, we'd take 3 or 4 days, and we do nothing but hang around the pool and get drunk, you know, and fool around with the girls, and, you know, smoke a few joints, and chill out until the next job. But after 3 or 4 days, you get antsy. It's okay, you know, where's the next job, you know? you want to be going all the time, you know? It takes a while.
He was really excited by it. He'd take his plane and fly. It rained. He went through the jungle. It was all about the adrenaline. He thrived on it. It was his drug of choice. He was his own worst enemy, when you think about it. He always wanted a bigger rush, more excitement.
He knew how to fly. He knew the risk he was taking. He was an adrenaline freak, probably, like they all are.
Dangerous. It's fun. It's adrenaline bust. It's a boost, you know. You become an adrenaline junkie. And frankly, we're all adrenaline junkies when we're in that business. We thrive on the adrenaline. The buzz is extraordinary. The money's secondary.
But it was a tug of war. We were going back and forth, and many times it didn't feel like we were winning the war, but at times we did.
We can't do what the cartels do. They could kill people, they could pay off people, they could threaten people. So they have that capability, and we didn't have that.
So there were people in Colombia that were very much affected, and the citizens of Colombia, the amount of violence that they had to put up with, and innocent people that were in the crossfire. The United States bears a burden because we create the demand.
It's not worth lying to ourselves anymore. If drugs enter the United States, it's because the United States is letting them in. There isn't a shortage of cocaine for users in Canada or the United States. There isn't a single dose missing. So where is the fight against drugs happening? Who's taking care of it? It's a joke.
This drug war is a sham. It's false. It's fake. That's called corruption and greed. You know, money is evil. Don't forget the old saying, the root of evil is money. I know pilots that were making an average of $3 to $4 million every 2 or 3 days. After 85, I don't think I ever did a flight under $3 million. I kept money up here, yeah, and my dad used to hide it in his double wall. I knew young guys that were 25, 30 years old and had $15, $20 million in their basement stashed. But they were so nervous, they would go to the restaurant, and after about an hour, they're all nervous and they want to go home. The money ruined their life. It's all cash, and so much of it, they weigh it. They don't even count it anymore. They just weigh it. That pallet, that's 10 million, that's 50 million, that's 100 million. I saw warehouses in Cali, which stacked to the ceiling.
That led to huge fortunes appearing throughout Colombia. The fortunes were so large. There was so much money, it became obvious because drug traffickers were spending so much.
The flashers are always there. The fancy cars in Miami and all that, the Miami Vice scene. These huge houses with all the art to show off that they got money. So I don't understand people's fascination with money. You want it because you don't have it. But when you got too much of it, you don't want it that much, believe me. It's more problems than it really brings.
That'd be a good question to ask him. Where's his money?
Fuck off. Don't like it complicated. I know where my box is. And it isn't in some bank. The business of the DEA now was not going after the damn drugs anymore. They were going after the money. The whole idea was to seize the money.
We conducted our investigation into the Colombian aviation units. The original strategy would start out with the purchase of an aircraft. As they went up in size, the cost of the plane went up. They could afford to walk away from that expense because they were making so much money on the cocaine. The real difficulty was to purchase the plane and try to keep it as long as they could.
You take the airplanes away from them, they had a hard time transporting the cocaine.
You know, the aircraft gets seized on drug loads. I would get a call, and they would say, well, we got this one seized such and such a time. It'll be up for auction on that date and that date. And that was it. So I would call up, and I would check the list and all that. And I'd call the sheriff, and I'd register my company in there. Yeah, I'm going to be there. I want to bid on that aircraft, and that aircraft.
To help the Colombians out, he went to the United States with cash. He'd buy back the planes the DEA had seized, and he'd bring them back to Colombia.
But, you know, I would never specifically go there and register to bid on a particular aircraft. I would bid on 5 or 6 or 7, which I had no intention of acquiring. But I would focus on the one that they wanted me. They said, that's the one we want, go get it.
Some of those planes were $400,000, $500,000, up to $1 million.
And it made sense. You follow the money, you could find where the bad guys are.
I had got a call to pick up a Mitsubishi Marquis. I said, yeah, okay. An MU2 that belonged to one of the Medellin's rings, and I got a call from the cartel. So I had brought 10% with me in cash. That day I had $65,000 US in my briefcase to go for that deal. Usually you leave a deposit. After you go to the bank, you pay the rest and you get the plane. But that time I drove with my dad to Burlington to take a flight down there. And I had it in my briefcase, and I was in a rush to get to Florida because the auction was the next day. Anyway, they pulled me in, and they said, what you have in the briefcase? I said, money. They said, did you declare it? No. They said, park your car there. Park the car, search the car, all that. What do you have in your briefcase? Well, I said, money and documents. Where are you going? I'm going to an auction. Well, so in the office, so they take it out, and then they counted every bill, and they registered every serial number. So that took about 3.5 hours.
We had a direct link between drug money being used to buy aircraft that were used to fly cocaine into Mexico that was targeted for the United States. And as an enforcement technique, we would use those opportunities for surveillance and for tracing the money back to the Colombian organizations.
And not only that, when they were questioning me and all that, they sent a fax to the sheriff's office in Broward County, and he returned back, yeah, we know this guy very well. He comes here often. His company's registered. Yes, he does come here. Yes, he's registered to come. He's going to be at the auction tomorrow. That's probably. And the DEA said, no, you're going there to buy drugs. Because once they get their hands on the money, that's it. My dad was with me, and he had 20 grand on him because he was going down to play the casinos and have some fun. So he got arrested too because he didn't declare it. I did 13 months in the penitentiary in the States for that. My dad did 12 months. The charge read, failure to declare a monetary transaction exceeding $10,000. And they sent me and my dad to Danbury, Connecticut after that. Oh, he took a big, my dad just laughed. He just, we get on with it, just deal with it. We had fun, it was pretty relaxed. And we had, there was some very high level financial criminals. Yeah, but he had his own little sideline going on, and I won't talk about it. That was his business. My old man had his own little dealings. But he was very generously compensated for his time.
According to him, it was fun. He taught inmates French and all. He doesn't seem scarred by the experience.
Oh, yeah, I enjoyed myself, and it was a good time.
And during his incarceration in an American prison, he met a Belgian man who sold weapons and other stuff to various countries.
But I got into the arms business with him. We sold weapons to various clients that needed them for various reasons, let's say. We oversaw local distribution in the Middle East and Africa. I had Ecuador, Peru, and Colombia as clients. I supplied them with bullets for the police, 9mm actually.
As a businessman, Raymond Boulanger's career was opportunistic. Weapons trafficking, drug trafficking aren't ends in themselves for him. They're a means to a living and adventurous lifestyle.
My dad was like that, and I'm like him. I do things my way. I've always been like that.
When he got out of jail, Raymond turned to selling weapons, aircraft parts, and aircrafts in countries that needed to be supplied clandestinely because they were on the US's blacklist.
He served as liaison between the buyer and the seller. He was the middleman that both parties knew and that delivered the merchandise. He was the one trusted with the merchandise, and he ensured that everything was delivered according to plan.
Belgium is really the center for arms businesses, you know, everybody's represented. It's also the headquarters for NATO. Yeah, actually, we were just down the street from NATO. Kitty Cat across the corner was the NATO headquarters. And that was our office, just right next to them. So you'd get to meet all the people from these countries and make your contacts and take your orders. So we would meet all the different people, the military attachés and all that, you know, and diplomatic soirees. He sent me a list every month, a list of what they needed, and I made the purchases.
There are lenient laws in Belgium. Belgian regulations work in favor, let's say, of clandestine and illegal operations of weapons trafficking, as they are, of course, quite lucrative.
I think it's sick what people do to make a buck in it.
So I would go out and shop for that. Kept me pretty well on the go. It's quite exciting. Sometimes I had to bribe people to get certain parts made because they were strict with military specification numbers on them. So I bribed people. I only remember a couple of occasions where I had to collect money, and we won't discuss the collection techniques here. They were given a choice. They either cooperated or they got shot. And they would be confronted with the briefcase and the gun. You either cooperate with us or you get killed. It's as simple as that. My clientele in my portfolio was Iran. Iran was my #1 client.
Weapons were being trafficked because of the United States embargo on the Middle East. That actually created business opportunities for some. So Merrick's would call on Raymond's services to sell radar parts and weapons parts.
I would buy the products they needed and sell them for a Swiss company, a Belgian company, and another one. The stuff eventually made it to Iran. Missiles, that kind of stuff, mines, grenades, those kind of explosives. I was mostly specialized in aircraft engines and parts. I sold all kinds of stuff for airplanes. Brake parts, propeller parts, speed drive parts. I would make a bunch of purchases and deliver them all at once. I was having tires made for the Iranians for their F-4 Phantom jets, which were American jets. So they couldn't really fly them anymore because they weren't allowed to get any more parts. So I would buy all the different parts for that, shipped through, cleared through a duty-free zone that I had here in a warehouse in Montreal. But the product actually never came here, and sold them to a dummy company in Switzerland, which was really the Iranians. So you get the idea, you know, we don't mind. The Americans can embargo everything all they goddamn well want. We couldn't give a shit. There's always a way to get around it. But I also had other clients. Libya was one of my clients, and I went to Libya on a regular basis.
Libya, at the time, was under a dictator's control, Colonel Gaddafi. Things were very heated with the United States. And, of course, Libya needed parts for its civil aircrafts and military aircrafts. And since Belgium is home to an international weapons market, it was probably the easiest place, or one of the easiest places, to buy those kinds of parts.
I would leave from Geneva and go to Tripoli. And once in Tripoli, I would leave Tripoli and I'd go do my inspections in the middle of the desert. Here, a little point here, it's called Beda. That was an oil rig, basically. There was an operating base. They had a big runway built there. They had a hangar. They had people that rotated in and out of there. So I'd arrive in Libya. They'd escort me to the hotel. I'd spend the night in the hotel. Next morning, I'd get on Libyan Airlines. I'd go into the desert in Beda, do all my thing there. The colonels there would meet me. I had an envelope that I used to carry. It was a bribe. It was not mine. It was being carried on behalf of another company. There was a Canadian company that was doing business in there, and that was who belonged to the envelope that I gave to the colonel. I mean, I didn't get to open the envelope, you know. But I knew what was in it, and I knew why, and I knew where it came from. Of course, I got paid for that. I didn't do that free. Every time I dropped a stupid envelope, that cost him $50,000.
I'm sure that when he was working in Belgium and he'd go off on missions, whether in Iran, Libya, or any other country, I'm sure he was perfectly well kept. He must have been wearing the best suits. He was probably wearing a Rolex. I am absolutely certain that he knew how to present himself.
Well, the Americans were really curious, and they wanted to know what the hell was going on, because I'm traveling into Libya and I'm traveling into Iran, who had been declared enemies of the United States and embargoed. So I was actually trading with their enemy, you know. But they really couldn't charge me. I'm a Canadian citizen, and Canadians, we're allowed to do business with Iran. Oh, so I did that for a few years. I had a good run over there.
But at some point, remember that in the 90s, there was a conflict in Iraq between the US and Iraq. That's when the Gulf War happened. And Raymond Boulanger at that point felt things were going to fall apart. He decided to completely retire from that line of commerce. That's one of the reasons why, when Raymond Boulanger got that phone call asking to import large quantities of cocaine into Quebec, he was interested.
People had tried and they said it was impossible, it couldn't be done. And I said, that's ridiculous. Of course it could be done. There's no such thing as impossible. It just takes a little longer to do the impossible, that's all. But, you know, that becomes a question of competence.
For about 3 months, the DEA was investigating a Colombian ring that was preparing to import cocaine.
This was a big case. I considered it the largest case I'd ever worked. And the fact that it's still the largest seizure in Canada today gives you an idea of its scope and how important it was.
We did not know anything about the pilot in the Casey case.
I never heard of anyone having this degree of experience with that type of risk. It was probably a somewhat unique type of a pilot that would take on this kind of a challenge.
It's being touted as the biggest drug bust in Canadian history and probably the most dramatic. A story covering 2 continents, a plane chase, and up to $1 billion worth of cocaine.
This was a big case. I considered it the largest case I'd ever worked.
We did not know anything about the pilot.
23 years for the pilot Boulanger. His name is Raymond Boulanger. Raymond Boulanger.
Well, I don't regret it. It was a hell of a lot of fun, let me tell you. It was quite a ride. I was involved in a lot of different operations.
Operations supervised by the CIA.
I used to think the CIA were the good guys, and then you start to realize the more you work for them, well, we're not the good guys. We're actually the bad guys. I talked with Pablo many times, and he was well into the CIA. They were all in bed with him. Cocaine. That's when it got interesting.
I was considered one of the biggest traffickers at that time. They asked me if I can help him, and I did.
The cartels have a history of violence, a wide trail of destruction and death.
Bad people.
It's the Far West.
It's all part of the game. My grandfather said there's 3 ways you can live life. You can lead, you can follow, or you can get the fuck out the way. I prefer to lead.
Quebec may be the biggest ever.
The enormous value of the plane's cargo that was crammed in here, that's just one part of the story.
This guy contacted me and asked me if I thought it would be possible to fly a large load of cocaine from South America to Canada. And I said, yeah, of course, it's no big deal.
The goal was to put 4,000 kilos of cocaine on one flight.
And that's it, you're on your way.
We were at work. We had just gotten there. It was 8:30 or 9 o'clock, something like that, when we got the call from Ottawa. It was about a plane that had left Colombia that was supposed to go to the U.S., but the Americans noticed it was actually headed to Canada.
So I just pulled off to the right here and parked the airplane with the nose facing west, and we got out of the airplane and started looking where the hell everybody was. I was standing here 300 clicks in the bush north of Montreal, and shit, 5 tons of cocaine, 20 below zero, and there's nobody here. I couldn't believe it. It's insane. I never saw anything that stupid. I got a call from a gentleman here in Montreal, a representative of the local mafia, trying to get an aircraft that would be able to fly a load directly from Colombia to Canada. And they had problems that they'd gone through a couple of pilots who couldn't do it. They'd gone through a couple of attempts that failed. So at one point, this guy contacted me and asked me if I thought it would be possible to fly a large load of cocaine from South America to Canada. And I said, yeah, of course, it's no big deal.
John Raymond Boulanger. He was approached by the Montreal Mafia to carry out a cocaine delivery operation from Colombia. Those people had already sponsored 2 operations over the previous months, and they had failed.
They didn't want the importation to fail, like in previous attempts. So, they were looking for a pilot that was capable of getting the job done.
We're considered, myself and the group that I'm in, to be in the top 4% of the best pilots in the world. Well, I asked for $50 million. And they said, yep, no problem. It's just not a game for amateurs. You know, it's very dangerous, and you have to be highly skilled or just somewhat a little bit crazy maybe along the edges. But, you know, there's not that many pilots that have the skill to be able to do that. Because, you know, the people had tried and they said it was impossible, it couldn't be done. And I said, that's ridiculous. Of course it could be done. There's no such thing as impossible. It just takes a little longer to do the impossible, that's all. But they had tried it a couple of times and they failed. So that becomes a question of competence. I went up myself and examined their runways. I took 2 of their people with me. I stopped at Casey on the way down, and I told them, that's where you're going to be. This is where you're going to be. Casey, we used to fly there a lot. We'd land there and go fishing in the river beside it.
During the Cold War, the Canadian Armed Forces built military installations in the north of Canada. One of them was the Casey runway. It was an emergency landing strip. It was very, very long and isolated in the middle of nowhere. For operations like the one Raymond was leading, to import drugs, it was perfect.
He also had to have intimate knowledge of the landing conditions at Casey to be able to land a plane that large with that type of a load on it. He had to be familiar with that particular runway and what preparations were necessary to make it successful. So it's our belief that Mr. Boulanger was probably the sole architect, at least for the transportation, aviation transportation part of this project.
There's always confidence that everything's going to go well. You know, we plan things and we do strategic thinking. So nothing is done haphazard here.
The idea was to do a test flight first to make sure it could be done successfully.
So they did a first flight with a King Air and 500 kilos of cocaine.
I did the first flight successfully, no problem at all. It went quite well. I left Colombia and over Casey, I just spiraled, landed at the airport, and there was my guy, and we unloaded. I took some fuel on, and we split. We were there, I think, probably, well, you could say 20 minutes, but, you know, some say 15, some say 18, but let's say 20 minutes. I was back in Colombia in less than 23 hours, less than 1 day.
The goal, eventually, over the following weeks, was to fly in with a much bigger load, 4,000 kilos of cocaine in one flight.
To transport 4,000 kilos of cocaine, they needed a bigger plane than a King Air. He decided on a Convair. The sponsors bought the Convair from a company called Avesca in Colombia.
Avesca was a cargo company based out of El Dorado Airport, the main international airport in Bogota. It was owned by a gentleman by the name of Luis Carlos Herrera Lascano.
Luis Carlos Herrera was a pilot. He started in the cocaine business back in the 70s and in the early 80s. Avesca was flying loads of cocaine. The connection was there, the conspiracy was there, the cocaine planes were there. So we knew Avesca was the transportation air wing for the cartels.
I had done flights with Convairs many times before doing the Casey one. I knew that was a perfectly good airplane for that. Convair 580 modified with General Motors turbines on it. Very powerful engines, and it's quite capable of carrying considerable overload.
The main example, what we would see is that they would try to increase the capabilities of the aircraft. They wanted to carry larger loads, heavier loads for a greater distance. And one way that they were able to go the greater distance was to add additional fuel to the plane. To me, it looked horrifying. In my view, it was a very risky proposition, and one that would take a very unique pilot to challenge that type of a risk. Or maybe you just weren't quite as rational as a regular pilot would be.
I'd done several flights to Mexico with Convairs. 580 was an excellent aircraft for that.
So typically what they would do is, when they were flying cocaine, they would disguise the plane by removing all the data tags. The identification tags were like the serial number on your automobile.
A lot of the guys would rent their aircraft out. They just changed the registration numbers on the aircraft for the flight. Well, they don't want to identify the aircraft directly, so when they send an aircraft out for that, the serial numbers are removed. They're camouflage airplane. You can't really, it's hard to detect the actual ownership.
So, November 12, 1992, about 5 days before the infamous Casey flight, Raymond Boulanger went to see his friend Guy Bernier on the south shore of Montreal.
Oh, boy. Oh, my gosh. I had a company out in Saint-Jean. We did maintenance of Hydro-Quebec planes, Convair 580s. One day, Raymond came to take a look in the hangar. There was a Convair that was almost a replica of the one he was going to use to fly to Casey.
As a joke, I put it on one that was pulled out of commission. I saw it in the hangar in Saint-Jean. The aircraft had been decommissioned. It was just being parted in pieces, had nothing left of it. And the registration had been canceled, obviously, but the letters were still there, so.
For Raymond, it was easy to take the letters and put them on another plane.
The letters just stuck in my mind, that's all. They said, well, give us a Canadian registration. It just came to my mind. Well, I'd go stick that on it. It's a bit of a joke, really. Sick sense of humor.
I thought, yep, that's Raymond. There was a first meeting with the Montreal Mafia sponsoring the operation at the Champ de Mars metro station.
I met the representative of the Mafia, Montreal Mafia. They're Sicilian, those ones. If you go use the other ones, Calabrese, they're Italians, but the Sicilians are Sicilians. They don't like to be called Italians. But I guess it was a mix of all of them in there. They had Calabrese, they had Sicilians, whatever, so I don't even know the one who I met, if he was a Calabrese or a Sicilian. But here it's definitely the Italian Mafia. Yeah, I met with the representative of the Sicilian Mafia, the Champ de Mars, but he brought along with him the guy they had hired to do the pickup.
The man that was going to wait for him on the Casey Strip with his accomplices was Christian Deschênes.
I wasn't happy about that because I don't like meeting people I don't need to. He started to tell me about his prowess and he'd done this and he'd done that, and I told him, quite frankly, I don't give a fuck who you are. You know, I don't want to know you.
From that point on, there was a lot of tension between the two men.
Well, I didn't really know him. I had no idea who he was, you know. And I'm a pretty quick judge of character, and you look somebody in the face, you can tell whether he's a fraud or not, you know, and this guy was full of shit from the get-go. So, and I saw him when we were arraigned in La Tuque, when they hauled us up to charge us. And he was in the cell there, the other one. Well, we didn't talk to him. I didn't want my Colombians to get anywhere near him. They had to keep him in the cell. The Colombians would have killed him. They would have jumped him right there. I went to pick up the aircraft for the flight around 5 o'clock in the afternoon in Bogota. They flew the aircraft to the desert, the Guajira. The runway we used in La Guajira was a runway we had used very often in the past when we take off with large aircraft. Heat gets up to 110 degrees in the daytime. You can't take off in 100-degree temperature. There's just no lift in the air. But we always managed somehow.
Raymond had 3 accomplices on board for the Casey flight.
My co-pilot was Juan Carlos Montes Restrepo. I had Jose Gonzalez was the electrician, and Jorge Rojas was the airframe and engine specialist. So that was the crew. The co-pilot gets $75,000 for a flight like that, and the fellas in the back get $50,000. The first vehicles that arrive are the ones with the barrels. So they load the barrels on board. There's armed men everywhere. There's 200 or 300 of them, and the last thing to arrive is a truck full of drugs. Then they all get in line and choobity-choo, and they take all the drugs out, and then they place them on the side. 4,343 kilos, to be exact. Well, yeah, they would have liked to put more, but that was it. Any more, 200 kilos more, I might not have got it off that runway. It was that critical.
When you think of the amount of drugs on that plane, believe me, most people thought he wouldn't be able to take off.
Yes, of course it's dangerous. It's what you're paid for. You know, no danger, everybody'd be doing it. It wouldn't be a big deal, would it? Yeah, we knew that. Yeah, it was going to be a really tricky flight. My scheduled departure was around 9:15. Well, you take all the runway you need, every inch of it, and then you just pull the aircraft off slightly, you let it float off itself, and that's it, you're on your way. So the aircraft did a wonderful job. Took off there just like nothing.
As soon as his plane left, he got a message that he was being tailed, he was being followed.
Well, I got a call right away telling me that I had a tail. Yeah, it had been less than 10 minutes since takeoff, and they warned us right away. Just after we take off, and another plane took off. There was an informant somewhere.
One of the things that I'm still challenged today was to understand how he thought he could have outrun the surveillance, particularly when it included the southern Florida, Caribbean area, and basically NORAD.
Shit, he was being followed by the American Air Force along the coast. The whole time, Jesus. There's no way to come up with Plan B.
But if he knew he was being followed, I don't understand why he wouldn't have diverted to an alternate site or even returned back to the jungle.
Well, heading back was out of the question. It was far too late. They called me right away and said that they had scanned and picked up the slick who had just taken off from Panama. And I said, okay, cool. That's when I decided to opt a few more longitudes to the east.
That delayed the flight a little. It also made him cross a violent storm north of Bermuda.
Typical North Atlantic storm, rough wind and ice. You get your ass kicked, this is kind of rough. It was your average North Atlantic storm. Ice, strong winds, freezing rain, you name it. It was a mishmash of a bunch of things. Very windy and bumpy. You know you're in deep shit when it gets bumpy and the plane does this. There's turbulence, lots of it. Well, the Colombians had never seen a North Atlantic storm, much less because I don't think they'd ever been out of Colombia. A little scared, yeah. Particularly the co-pilot. Thought the airplane was going to come apart. This kind of weather is very unforgiving when people are incompetent. We were in there for about an hour. And then all of a sudden, you just fly out of it, and all the air is all smooth all of a sudden. So it's quite a change. It's all of a sudden, whoosh, you're just like you go in the madhouse. You boom, boom, bippity bop, and you're tossed all over the place, and then, boop, you're out. Oh, yeah, you can get up and go in the back. We have our lunch with us and everything. We have a little table set up and everything in the back. Yeah, you have a lot of time to relax. You're just cruising along at altitude, heading in one direction, so there's not much going on. And not long after that is when we spotted the Canadian fighter jets.
A Convair twin-engine plane took off from Colombia. A few quick phone calls, and two CF-18s from Goose Bay, Labrador were up in the air.
But he followed me all the way down, and I said, oh, that's not going to last very long for you, buddy. So the lower he goes, the faster he burns up his fuel. He left, and the other one got closer. And we were just timing how long it was going to take for him to run out of gas. Yeah, we were timing it. How long? 10 minutes? 15? Nah, 8 minutes? 8 minutes, one of my engineers won the bet. It took 12 minutes. So he was supposed to buy lunch when we got back to Colombia, but we didn't get back to Colombia. So I just paralleled the river and kept the aircraft at high speed and down, so the other jet pulled right up beside us, flew around us, made circles all around. He went around the plane 2 or 3 times, and he got in front, and then he made his way here, made signs like that to go down, and I just waved at him and said, I'm going forward. It was already critical. He was about to run out of fuel. So the other guy decided that was it was critical, so he just peeled off and away he went.
They spotted the airplane over New Brunswick, but because of low fuel, the Air Force let it get away.
The military pilots landed in Fredericton to refuel. The suspicious plane got away from the police and army.
Yeah, that's all part of the job. It's no big deal. I mean, we get intercepted all the time. It's no big deal.
He must feel that he's got a lot of luck in his life, and the fact that he's still here today, not sure of the word, I don't want to use nonchalant, the nonchalant pilot. Mr. Boulanger takes an extraordinary amount of risk and has obviously had some success up till this point with that risk. Had he succeeded, I'm convinced there would have been many more flights to Casey, Canada.
It was time to head to Casey, but he didn't want to fly through American airspace.
If you fly over the United States without permission, you're intruding in American airspace. Wherever you go, they'll come and get you.
So what he did was fly north along the New Brunswick-Maine border. During that time, he was flying a very low altitude, about 100 feet above the treetops.
We don't transmit on our radios ever. If you transmit a radio signal, they can detect your position immediately. So we don't transmit. Make no noise. Approach straight in the runway. I said I didn't plan on flying around, taking a look at the scenery. So I approached the runway from far out, flat out, at low altitude, and headed straight in. And I remember when I reversed the props to slow the airplane down, there was just a big white cloud. We just disappeared in the big white cloud. And then we started looking around. Where the hell is everybody? Nobody here. Like a big WTF. Big surprise. Nobody here.
The Evening News with Suzanne Laberge.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. This morning, the American FBI signaled the presence of a suspicious airplane flying over the Atlantic approaching Nova Scotia.
On November 18th, 1992, I got to the detachment I was stationed at as usual.
We were at the office. We got in at 8:30 or 9 o'clock, something like that. We got a call from Ottawa. We didn't get much information. A plane had left Colombia and was headed toward the U.S., but the Americans noticed it was actually headed toward Canada.
So we dispatched all our personnel, teams of 2. All of the province's detachments were called on. In Gaspé, Sept-Îles, and everywhere. All of our RCMP officers were going to check every runway the plane could land on.
We left that morning on a military helicopter because I knew about Casey. I was convinced that if this was really happening, they would land at Casey. It's the best place to land, a mile-long asphalt runway.
So I just pulled off to the right here and parked the airplane with the nose facing west. And we got out of the airplane and started looking where the hell everybody was. And there was nobody here. I see all the tracks, truck tracks and trailer tracks and skidoo tracks and whatever. Like there's been a lot of activity there, but there's nothing there right now. So we knew that somebody had been there for all the time. Where the hell they were now, I had no idea. What the? I'm standing here 300 clicks in the bush north of Montreal and shit, 5 tons of cocaine, 20 below zero, and there's nobody here. I couldn't believe it. It's insane. I never saw anything that stupid.
When Raymond got off the plane and realized Christian Deschênes and his associates weren't there, it was a race against the clock. Raymond knew he had to get out of there quickly. At the same time, the police knew that a plane had landed somewhere with cocaine in it. Officers had no idea where it was, but they were in a rush to find it.
At the time of the Casey incident, I had 2 sets of duties at the RCMP. I was part of the Criminal Intelligence Squad in Montreal, and I was part of the Tactical Intervention Team. That morning, around 9 a.m., the head of my tactical team wanted us to meet as soon as possible at the office because there seemed to be an airplane coming in from Colombia that had disappeared. He needed our help to trace it.
I was on my way to fix a machine. At the 2.5 mile mark about, all of a sudden I saw a big plane. It was coming down in compression. There was black smoke coming out of the back. I thought, damn it, it's in trouble. I decided to go see what's happening with the plane. Big plane like that? We never seen one land there.
Went out on the highway beside there and I hitched right down to the village to go make a phone call, see if we can get some phone calls in. Because we didn't have any cellular phones here at that time. Took a walk onto the little road that's over here. I waited and I saw a vehicle coming, so I flagged him down.
They had gotten off the plane by the time I got there. So I asked him, what's going on? He said the plane wasn't functioning well and we really needed a phone. A pilot with 3 Colombians? That's rare. It's a little fishy, right? He's looking for something. He was trying to find a phone. I brought him to a phone. I'm a good Samaritan, so I offered him a lift.
Drove us down to the village in Casey, so I had to go down there and I went to the dépanneur.
I dropped them off there. Then I went inside to tell them that the people I picked up needed to use the phone. They talked to Jean Houdon.
Jean Houdon was the owner. He was set in his ways. He grew up in Casey. He never left Casey. So he was kind of the mayor of the town, because there wasn't one. He wasn't a bad guy, but when he started drinking, it could last 4 to 5 weeks.
And we made phone calls, and I couldn't reach anybody in Montreal. I was trying to find out where the hell these people were. Nobody was answering their phones. So I wasn't very impressed with that. You'd think somebody would have been monitoring the stupid phone at one point, you know? But no. No, they totally screwed it up from the get-go. Never seen such a bunch of incompetent nimcoos in my life. Idiots. The bozo in charge of it decided it was time to leave, and he left at 7:25 in the morning. I would strongly recommend that he doesn't ever cross my path or come anywhere near where I am, because he will disappear. And I phoned an air taxi company.
They were looking for a place to get another plane, so they called up and took.
You know, one of my dispatchers working the morning shift just come in. He was a little edgy when he came in. He told me, Yvon, just got a phone call from Casey. They need a plane right now to leave Casey, so they needed to get to Montreal quickly.
I was going to wait till the airplane arrived, go have my Colombians get the pilot out of the plane without him seeing me.
Yeah, if he'd taken off, too bad for our pilot. But he would have gotten off the plane. I don't know how, though. He would have stayed in Casey, though.
Put him in the Convair, we'll leave him there and take 4 or 5 bales and a couple of my Colombians and get the hell out of there with his plane. Let the cops find the other guy there, let them figure that one out. The old man from the dépanneur with his pickup drove us back up to the runway. And the 3 Colombians sat in his truck waiting. And I walked out on the runway waiting for the Aztec to arrive. By that point, we were on the runway. 2 jets, Air Force F-18s, came buzzing over the treetop. The noise scared the Colombians, and they took off with the guy's truck. I don't know what the hell they think they were doing, because they had no idea where they were. And you're talking the bush in Canada. They'd never seen cold like that before. And the guy wondered what the hell was going on.
I'm sure Tijan Houdon wasn't okay with all of it.
So he takes off, and I'm standing here all by myself. The Colombians are gone, and I'm looking at the airplane. I couldn't believe it. There's 5 tons of cocaine in the darn thing, and I'm standing out here on my own, and I said, this is not possible. I was just stupefied.
At Stone Consolidated, we made paper for newspapers, and Tijan called me all of a sudden. He was vulgar. God fucking damn it, the Colombians left with my pickup truck. I said I'd go look around. I looked around the camps. At the bottom of the hill, there was a camp on a sand mound. Once I got down there, I saw Tijan's truck in the ditch.
Yeah, they tried to get away, but on the other side of the camp, they drove into the ditch, and they went into the woods on foot.
I called Tijan and told him, I found your truck. I didn't touch it. He told me the plane was full of drugs, so I thought, ooh.
When we got to Casey, the plane was at the end of the runway, so we landed.
When we got there and saw the Convair, it was bigger than what he had been told. But thankfully, we had the letters, the identification letters.
When we saw it, we didn't know if the drugs were still in there or if they were already gone. That's why we decided to go after the pilot and his crew. So we got back into the helicopter and followed the road along the woods.
So anyway, after all that rigmarole, I went back to the highway, started hitchhiking again. And a guy came by, picked me up, and off I went down. He took me down to the Stone Consol camp.
We followed the road. We could see the Consolidated office.
And we got off because I had to call my superiors to check in with them. We didn't have communications.
The guy, my forced worker, showed up with Raymond Boulanger. So Raymond asked to use the phone, so I let him make a call. I went outside.
I tried again to contact the stupid number in Montreal. Didn't get anywhere. Yeah.
All of a sudden, the helicopter landed at the end of the camp. There was Corporal Pelletier.
We landed there and we went in to meet the pilot.
So I made my way to the office and I saw someone on the phone. He was sitting at the desk and making a call.
I was on the phone, and the guy looked at me, he said, we need to use the phone. I said, I'll be finished in a second. And I said, who are you? He said, I'm the RCMP.
I asked, who are you? He said, Raymond Boulanger. I'm the pilot of the airplane.
I'm the pilot of the airplane. He said, you're under arrest, you know.
Well, I asked him to specify what plane. He said, the plane on the runway, the one that landed.
I said, cool, here, you can use the phone now. Cheer, bye. That was it. 18 years of flying for the drug cartels ended here, right here.
He was done for.
Yeah, he'd been caught. You always think that you won't get caught.
It's being touted as the biggest drug bust in Canadian history and probably the most dramatic. A story covering 2 continents, a plane chase, and up to $1 billion worth of cocaine.
The enormous value of the plane's cargo, that's just one part of the story. Another part is where it happened. Casey, Quebec, a remote little community that police say is now the site of the largest drug bust in the country's history.
I'll say it like that guy. You never see Casey on maps, but now, thanks to this, maybe one day it will show up on one.
We got a call from the head of our team, Corporal Barry. He said, listen, we just found the plane. It's in Casey. We'll wait for you. Get over here.
You know, such an important seizure and making those arrests, that's a dream come true for an officer working in drug enforcement.
But we had to go back to the plane to make sure the drugs stayed there. They were left there unsupervised.
Sergeant Rivard left with Mr. Boulanger. We went back to the airplane.
In the meantime, we called the Montreal office because they had asked us to wait for them. They wanted to send people from Montreal, but it was minus 40 degrees out there. We were wearing jeans and light winter jackets, so we decided to go wait in the plane. René didn't think it was a good idea, but I told him we had to.
Just to make sure that everything was there.
It was there. All of it was there.
The plane that had come from Colombia was carrying over 4 tons of cocaine.
The RCMP guy told me what it was worth. It was pure cocaine. It was worth $150 per ounce. That was a lot of money's worth.
And they all started arriving from all over the place, the army and everything else, and the whole shit show went on.
With machine guns on each side of the plane.
There were armed police officers, and it was a huge deal. That's when they told me, you never know what can happen. Some people had lost money because of the bust.
That was their fear, that commandos would show up and just bomb the camp.
Cartels are powerful.
When we got there, we were shocked. We could see fresh tire marks made by a truck. And since they were fresh, we figured the truck had been waiting for the shipment there.
Deschênes and Forza were supposed to be at the end of the KC runway when the plane was landing to get the drugs. But as we know, they left sooner. They went back to Montreal.
So when he got contact with his bosses, they told him, where are you? Well, we thought the airplane wasn't coming. Nobody told you the airplane wasn't coming. Get your ass the hell back up there. So he turned around and he went back up in a pickup truck, him and another guy.
Up north like that, the one disadvantage for organizations is that there's only one road.
Around 2:30, more RCMP guys showed up. They got in a Connell line with their 12 gauges through the windows looking for the Colombians.
We went a little further south. That's when I saw that the footprints going into the woods had been erased with some branches.
One of the Colombians tried to erase their footprints in the ground in the snow by using branches. That wasn't really effective because you could still see the trail, even if you can't see a footprint. So, not too bright.
We went into the woods and followed the trail. The prints looked fresh, and all of a sudden, the prints stopped, and there was a hole.
They took off in the forest, and after they found a little, sort of like a little cave type thing, and they were all huddled in there trying to keep warm. They were almost frozen to death.
One of them was in hypothermic shock. If we hadn't found them that night, they would have been dead by morning.
After I was arrested, they brought me back at one point to the Stone Console, and then they picked them up around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The hell do you think you were going? What the hell was all that about? Do you realize that you're in a country you've never been here? You don't speak the language. You haven't got a clue where you are geographically speaking, and where were you planning on going exactly? You know, I didn't know. They weren't happy with that, but anyway, the co-pilot was a bit of an idiot. So the other said, we didn't want to go. We didn't want to go. I said, okay, this doesn't matter right now. I said, you know, you could have died out there. They wanted to strangle the son of a bitch.
After dinner, another RCMP guy showed up. He said, Carol, you have to come light something up for me. We're going to search Jean Hudot's truck. All right. So I parked the Econoline sideways in the middle of the road and lit the truck up. I stayed in the bus and let the guy do his job. All of a sudden, a really nice pickup truck showed up. It looked brand new. It was shiny, like a mirror.
When you're working, trucks get dirty. This one was spotless.
I flashed the headlights and the RCMP guy came. I said, those guys didn't look like Jesus' children. They had shady faces. He said he'd go check it out. He went to go see them, and they said they were coming back to fix 2 machines at the 2.5-mile mark. They said, we work for Console. We're here to fix 2 machines. No. And I said, I knew all my employees' trucks. If one of them got a new one, I always knew about it right away.
They were arrested and charged.
There's nothing to think, you know, you just deal with the situation. Ah, shit, you know, okay, what's next, you know?
He didn't look like a guy who had just been arrested for smuggling the biggest quantity of cocaine in Canadian history. I found it rather odd.
Calm, smiling, cooperative.
I should have handcuffed him, but I didn't. I was supposed to, but I didn't.
I spent 37 years working at the RCMP in Quebec. I have never seen anyone like him.
What are you going to do? There's nothing else you can do. You can stand there and scream and fume and fart. You're there. The deal is done, you know, that's it. The jig is up, you're over. You just deal with it. I'm going to get arrested, I'm going to get charged, and that's it. So deal with it and get it over with as quickly as possible.
You seem to accept the situation. He was arrested, and he knew he wasn't going to get himself out of it.
So this is what we know. What we're talking about is 3 tons of cocaine worth over $1 billion.
I got a call one day that the Canadian authorities had captured a Convair 580 in Casey, Canada.
And when I first heard it, I go, Canada? They're going up to Canada? I knew they were going everywhere else. Looked at it, I go, yeah, okay, they'll do anything.
We arrived in Quebec to identify the plane. It was pretty obvious that it was most likely one of Avesca's planes, one of Herrera's planes.
So I told Chuck to work, I think we have something here. That's what really got me going.
I never thought I'd see him in custody. After that time period, the sale of aircraft from the United States to Colombia dropped off considerably. They still would use aircraft, but not to the degree that they had before the Casey incident. You take every victory you can get, and this was quite a victory at the time.
The seizure and the fact that everyone involved was being convicted, it was definitely a really big accomplishment. It was a dream come true for everyone on the Drug Enforcement Squad.
It's fun. It's like in the movies. When nothing goes wrong.
The way I look at it, you win some, you lose some. That day I lost, they won. So, big deal. That's the only one I ever lost.
Casey is probably the biggest bust I ever worked on in my entire career.
It's definitely the biggest drug importation in Canadian history.
The seizure in Quebec may be the biggest ever.
We determined that there were 4,323 kilos of cocaine.
Worth $2.7 billion in total.
Close to 3 times more than we thought.
The biggest cocaine importation in this country's history.
4 individuals will respond in court to all sorts of charges.
By the time they decided to move us all down to the prison, it was about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. 1 person per helicopter. They could have put all of us in 1 helicopter, it would have been the same thing. But they had to night the big show. It was the apocalypse. It was like in the movie in Vietnam. It was the same helicopters they used back in Vietnam, too. They had SWAT teams on the roof and things all over the place. And the lights on and the newspaper and the media there. And the helicopters coming in, you know, making a big show like that.
6 suspects, 3 Canadian, 3 Colombians, were arraigned in court this evening in La Truc.
Armed to the teeth, about 30 Royal Canadian Mounted Police and Sûreté Quebec officers created an impenetrable barrier, putting in place the highest security measures.
But then again, you got to give it to the poor police, the poor guys. They got to get out and play with their toys now and then, you know, and they never really get an opportunity to really shoot at somebody or get all their gear and actually go into action. So it must be a bit frustrating for them.
I think our biggest concern was securing the perimeter. We took it seriously.
When we got there was tons of people already. The room was packed. There was people standing everywhere. It's like a big party.
To avoid talking and going to trial and revealing who hired you, people plead guilty and tell us nothing. So the organization just keeps moving forward and and there you go.
And you don't tell. You have contractual agreements, you know. You can't divulge that information because they'll come after you. If you compromise situations, they'll come after you. And they're ruthless. They'll kill you.
When we pled guilty, that was it. It was over. We got to leave. We didn't want to stay there any longer than we had to. We got it over with and got out of there.
Narcotics trafficking, transport, conspiracy.
Importation. That was the only charge I got.
The Crown wasn't going to just hand out a light sentence. It was out of the question. The sentence had to reflect the gravity of the offense.
I got 23 years and my crew got 20 years each.
As far as the sentence goes, I feel no pity. I think that 23 years, well, if it were up to me, I would have given more than that.
But it's the first time I got arrested for drugs in all the times I've been flying drugs. And I wouldn't have got caught that time if the Italians had been there doing their job. I wouldn't have got caught.
Today at the Shawinigan Courthouse, surprise, 4 of them pleaded guilty. The judge sentenced the 3 Colombians to 20 years, and the Quebecer, Raymond Boulanger, who was the pilot, was sentenced to 23 years.
Yes, I'm very pleased. I think that the sentence is appropriate and fair, and given all the circumstances.
Yes, there's nothing to freak out about. It's just a sentence in front of a judge. It's no big deal. You know what they did with judges in Colombia? You know what I mean? You either walk away or boom.
The system didn't put you in there. You put yourself in there, so deal with it. That's all part of it. What else is there to say? Just get on with it. Deal with the sentence. You know, you went in and you did it. Do your time now. That's it.
So he got a 23-year prison sentence, but people aren't going to remember the actual sentence.
They brought us from the cell downstairs up the stairs, and when they opened the door, there was a corridor there. I couldn't count them. It was a whole maze of journalists, click, 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 and taking pictures and stuff like that. And the Colombians and the other guys were all hiding their faces. What are you, pussy? Don't care. I'm not going to hide my face. I'm not ashamed of what I do. So I just winked at them, and that was it.
I saw Raymond just like I'd always known him. He was a charmer, even in handcuffs. He had a nice smile on. That was the Raymond Boulanger I knew.
My sense of humor. What are you going to do?
He was boastful. He liked it. He really did. He liked getting the attention. He would have been a good movie star.
I could have flipped the bird at him. I didn't. My mom said that's not polite. Yeah, so you caught me. You caught me. Big deal. You know, that's all.
Donnacona is the largest penitentiary in Quebec. Inmates have committed violent crimes, murders, attempted murders, drug importation, organized crime. It's really, really a dangerous place. It's scary, it's violent.
You got some pretty heavy-duty criminals and stuff in there, but not all murderers. Got rapists, lots of those. But, whatever, the time I was here, I saw 7 murders.
It isn't known, but the police are after him because his halfway house has not heard from him.
You don't want to give me parole? I'll parole myself.